And I return to Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, The Witness's Secrets. I asked the Englishwoman for an interview, but she declined, so I left the hut without making a fuss. Then, watching secretly from outside, I saw the woman being stabbed and the other witnesses come running. The detective realized that the victim still had a pulse, so he ran off to fetch help. That's when this writer man here asked the woman a very significant question. But he didn't say anything about that in his testimony, which is why Mini-Minmoism demands I reveal it now. You mean to say the victim? The victim regained consciousness. And when she did, you decided to ask her a question? That's, true, yes. He did, and that's not all. The woman gave him a very definite answer. An answer that incriminates the accused. This is preposterous. Why am I only hearing about this now? Why didn't you mention this before, you yokel hack? It wasn't even a conversation. Yes, I did pose the withering English Rose a question, I don't deny it. But she could no longer speak. She was barely conscious even. She could no longer speak, and yet she said something incriminating. Counsel for the defense, I expect a thorough cross-examination to be conducted here. This court must and will know the truth. Absolutely, Your Excellency. The reporter is claiming that Miss Brett implicated Ray somehow. What on earth could have happened in that hut? Okay.
Hold it!
You asked her for an interview, you say. Well, of course I did. I wanted to ask her about the incident she was involved in at the end of last year. About the case in which Dr. John H. Wilson lost his life. That's not the way I phrased it. Mini-Minmoism calls for a straight talking. Why did you murder Dr. Wilson, is how I put it to her. Yes, that sort of talking is as straight as a ruler. Ask every question as if you're asking for a menu in a restaurant, I say. It's the best way. A veteran at the paper taught me that. And how did Miss Brett answer? With one simple phrase. Get the fuck out. Mystery is a woman's charm. That told me, so I waltzed right out of there. Really, something about that doesn't quite seem to fit together. Leave every room as if you're waltzing in a dance hall, as I say. It's the best way. A veteran at the paper taught me that.
Hold it!
That was very persistent of you, considering Miss Brett had just turned you away. Persistence wins the prize. Any Minmoist will tell you that. Let them think you've left, and just when you lower when they lower their guard, that's when you swoop in for the scoop. And the fruits of your labor are all too apparent in this telling photograph. Though I'm sure the young yokel student would rather not be reminded of this damning evidence. Actually, it's thanks to that photograph that we managed to identify this witness. And now that you found me, I'll tell you whatever you want to know. I've got nothing to hide. I'm sure. Please do go ahead, witness. The court is eager to hear what you have to say. Try to stop me. There's a story to tell here, and I'm going to tell it. It takes to realize that it took still false, so we're out to fetch help.
Hold it!
And Soseki-san remained behind in the hut. That's right, yep. Our author friend here was a blabbering wreck, shaking all over from his head to his toes, mustache twitching, eyes bulging. What do you expect? You don't know the terrifying troubles that taunted me whilst traveling abroad. Back behind baleful bars. They'll be coming for me, surely. That's all I could think. I felt as though I were gasping for air, drowning in a sea of cold sweat. Poor Soseki-san, his experiences in London have scarred him deeply. As the world seemed to close in around me, I quietly recited a prayer to Amida Buddha. eternal emptiness, empty eternity. The end is coming for me shortly. No sutras are to resound in my courtroom, please. And now we come to the crucial part. That's when it happened. That's when this writer here asked a woman a very significant question. What question? What exactly did he say? Why don't we ask him directly instead of getting it secondhand? Well, now, you should hear that from the horse's mouth, I think. Don't you, Mr. Writer Man? Out with it, you yokel hack! What did you say to her? What did you say to the dying Englishwoman? Well, in truth, I'd been catching crabs at the water's edge and building castles in the sand, you see. Well, the seaside is a place to be at leisure, I suppose, even for a grown man. But then, all of a sudden, from that little beach hut, a young girl's panic-stricken cries for help pierced the air. Hey. I ran up the beach to see what was happening, to find the defendant leaning over the collapsed victim. As soon as Inspector Hosonaga saw Miss Brett on the ground, he sprinted off to get help. Why don't we have him testify to whether this is true or not? And then, just a moment later, I heard a faint a moan from the dead Englishwoman. I nearly jumped out of my skin. What did you ask her, Soseki-san? I asked her, who did this to you? Don't protract this any longer. How did the woman respond? She didn't. She said nothing in response. But... When in the stand, you will answer the questions asked of you unambiguously. Now, without evasion or reticence, I demand that you amend your testimony. I will. I asked her, who did this to you? But she never replied.
Hold it!
So you tried to find out who the culprit was. He who asks a question is a fool for a minute. He who does not remains a fool forever. And having been labeled a criminal twice during my time in Great Britain, I was quick to make up my mind. Better to be a fool for a minute than remain a fool in prison forever. However, you've indicated that the victim failed to respond, is that correct? I know why. I know why the Englishwoman said nothing. She was ignoring me because of my stoop and mustache, because I'm Japanese. Oh dear, Soseki-san has really developed a dislike for the English, it seems. Having read the report on his time in Great Britain, I can't say I'm surprised by his xenophobia. But the Englishwoman didn't ignore you at all. Did she, Mr. Writer Man? Well, yes, all right. She did respond in a manner of speaking, I suppose. She just lifted a trembling finger and pointed in the direction of the defendant.
Hold it!
Miss Brett pointed a finger at the defendant. Soseki-san, is that really true? Well, if this were true, and we see footprints here in front, if this were true, where is this? The culprit would have been behind her. This does not seem to pan out. It's not easy to stand here and say this, but when we first entered the beach hut, the Englishwoman was sprawled on the floor before us, with the student girl standing on the far side of her. And when I asked who did this to you, the Englishwoman summoned her last ounce of strength and to point a trembling finger at the back of the hut, which was, it can't be denied, in the direction of the student girl who stands accused today. were someone behind the shoddily built wall taking photographs. Soseki-san, why on earth did you neglect to mention this in your original testimony? Fiddlesticks, I say. This is not a British court of law. You will respond in Japanese. Yes, of course. The Englishwoman did point her finger towards the back of the hut, but I was trembling, and she was trembling, and everything was a blur. And thinking about it, I feel as though perhaps she was pointing in a slightly different direction. Actually, no, not slightly, in a very different direction to where the student girl was standing. So, somewhere at the back of the hut, where nobody was standing at all. You mean that your memory of events and the direction in which the victim was pointing are both unclear? Yes, that's it, unclear. I'm very, very unclear.
Objection!
Your Excellency, surely this proves the matter beyond all reasonable doubt. Yes, the woman may barely have been conscious, and yes, perhaps her finger wavered slightly, but there can be no doubt that this was an attempt by the victim to confirm the identity of her assailant. Why? Because as the court can see, there was no other point. There was no one other than the accused in the direction the victim was pointing. It is now abundantly clear that no one besides the accused could possibly have committed this crime. I am inclined to agree, and in the absence of any credible argument to the contrary, I believe we can now conclude this trial. No. The headline's writing itself. Dashing lawyer's hopes dashed. 92 point across the whole page. We'll do an extra edition. This is a serious blow, Susato. Unless we're able to identify the true culprit and substantiate our claim with evidence, the judge will give his ruling and the trial will be over. But that's impossible, Father. We don't even know how the crime was committed yet. Impossible though the task may seem, we have no choice. We must think back over everything we've learned thus far. Somewhere in all those details, I'm confident we'll find the clue we need. Ray gave us her account of how events unfolded in the defendant's antechamber before the trial resumed. She told us what happened at the precise moment Miss Brett was killed. The Englishwoman was sitting at the back of the hut listening to what I was saying, and then, a moment later, she suddenly got to her feet before collapsing on the floor in front of me, with a knife in her back. How could Miss Brett have been stabbed in the back in a beach hut that was empty but for herself and Ray? Somewhere amid all the information we've gathered so far, there must be an answer to that question. I take it then that the defense has nothing further to add. So, the gallant yokel student's luck finally runs out. I can't say I'm surprised. In that case, I am ready to deliver my final verdict on this matter. This is a crucial turning point now. If I can't establish what really happened, it's over. Where was the real culprit hiding, and how did he or she stab the victim?
Objection!
Your Excellency, I respectfully ask you to postpone your adjudication for the time being. Oh, to what end, counsel? The defense would like to present the court with an alternative theory. An alternative theory that can explain who the victim was actually trying to implicate with her dying gesture.
Objection!
An alternative theory? Ha! None exists.
Objection!
There was someone else present at the scene who could have committed this crime. What? And the victim, Miss Brett, tried to reveal who it was to those around her at the time, by mustering all her remaining strength and pointing a trembling finger in the killer's direction. This is fiction, fantasy. Very well. As you seem so sure of yourself, counsel, I am prepared to hear your alternative theory. So, young Ryunosuke Naruhodo. Yes, Your Excellency. You will present your latest theory to the court by means of this plan. At the moment the victim was stabbed, where exactly are you proposing the culprit was concealed? Well, let's actually take a look at this photo. So it looks like, I don't know, the corner? I mean... Well, like, are we assuming that there's the door, and obviously Ray, it looks more to the right of the victim than behind her. But if we're just assuming the door is going to be orientating this, then I would suggest that the picture was taken, like, from here. Or here. If she pointed behind her, she was looking, like, here. Like, I don't... How can you tell? Is it just gonna be anywhere behind? I guess we'll just do the back wall then.
Take that!
The true culprit was in this area here. There, Counsel. And that's right, Your Excellency. I believe the culprit was hiding in the location I've indicated. Why? Oh, well, that's rather hard to say. Jesus Christ. Let's try it again. There's apparently an actual hole in the wall on the map. I'm gonna have to hide my fucking software to be able to see this. I don't see it. Like, here? Or is this the stool? Like, what the fuck is this? Because you'd think, I mean, that looks like a chair to me, but apparently this is the stool.
Take that!
Naruhodo-san would never give up, and I'm a Naruhodo now. The true culprit who fatally stabbed Miss Brett was concealed in this location here. Are you mad, Counsel? You're suggesting the culprit was outside the hut. What? I hate how fucking specific you had to be there. But student lawyer Naruhodo-san Esquire, that makes no sense at all. You just pointed out the exact spot where I was hiding to get my scoop snap. But I didn't see any suspicious individuals loitering about, I can swear to that. Obviously, if the culprit had been outside the hut, there is no way that he or she could have stabbed the victim who was inside the hut. Actually, Prosecutor Auchi, there is a way. And, in point of fact, defense can provide evidence strongly suggesting that this is precisely the way Miss Brett was killed. You're bluffing. You're bluffing, you yokel. The defense's assertion is clearly too fantastical for the court to comprehend. You will need to give us more guidance, Counsel. What piece of evidence corroborates your theory that the victim was stabbed from outside the hut?
Take that!
Well, I've presented it now, but I haven't the first idea why I chose this piece of evidence. What the fuck? What other piece of evidence is there? I guess it would be this one then. Yeah, come on.
Take that!
The original photographic print of the crime scene. Yes, it's clearly visible in this print. A trace of the fatal thrust that was delivered from outside the beach hut.
Attention!
Do you take us for fools? There's no hint of any such thing. I'm not sure that everyone present would agree. Someone, at least, appears to have noticed what it is that I'm referring to. Counsel, once again, I must call on you to be explicit for the court. Where on this photograph is the trace of the stabbing which you claim to have took place from outside the hut?
Take that!
Look closely just here. In the screen at the back of the hut, you can see the effects of a blade having been forced through the reeds. No, I can't. I can't see any such thing. It's true that the hut in question had 4 walls, as you'd expect, however. By parting the reeds, a knife blade could easily penetrate them. This is extraordinary. Yes. The true culprit actually stabbed the victim from outside the beach hut. And of everyone present at the scene, there was only one person who could have done that. Only one person who was directly outside the hut when Miss Brett was killed. Daiten Menimenmo-san, it could only have been you.
Attention!
This preposterous idea leaves me almost speechless. Just look at that photograph again. The victim lies almost exactly in the center of the beach hut, does she not? Are we to assume, as part of this farcical scenario, that the assailant is a knife thrower?
Objection!
No, of course not. We're not. If you recall the testimony of the defendant about the events just before the victim's death, inside the beach hut, I confronted Miss Brett. But she just sat on the stool at the back of the hut, smiling sweetly at me as if she knew she was untouchable. A stool? Have another look at the photograph. The slit in the reed screen would align perfectly with the back of a person who was sitting on that stool. My word. So, in fact, the victim was killed whilst sitting on that stool by a stab wound to her back delivered through the reed screen. Having been attacked, Miss Brett rose to her feet instinctively, but then, unable to speak, she collapsed on the floor in the middle of the hut, before the defendant, Membami-san's appalled eyes. And that, Your Excellency, is the truth of what happened on the beach that day. By your silence, Minimum-san, I take it that you don't deny the charge. This is absurd. That will do. If it would appear that we have a tacit admission of guilt from the witness. I mean, I wouldn't call it a tacit admission so much as not actively denying it. Accordingly, this court has successfully established the truth of this matter, which means that the defendant, Membami-san, is innocent of the crime. Again, aren't we a little hasty to this? I mean, we've only shown, not to support the other side or anything, but we've only shown probable cause. We have not actually shown that this guy did this crime, right? Oh, thank goodness. I finally made him cave. And then he's gonna go, ha ha ha, not so fast. And then we're gonna go through another fucking round of this, I'm willing to bet. I must say, I've never been more proud. No, this can't be. The Aochi clan can't... What of my growth? My growth of hope? It wasn't all an apparition. I can't accept this. I won't. I've lost my voice. I see no reason for the continuance of this trial. I will therefore move to conclude proceedings by delivering my final verdict and... I fucking knew it. Ha ha ha. It was I, Dio. This is all very convenient. This is how the highest court in our mighty empire delivers justice, is it? Suppressing well-meaning citizens' freedom to speak and branding them as criminals. But we've established that the victim was stabbed from outside the hut through the reed screen walls. And no one but you was in place at the time to have his hand on the hilt of the blade. It's a perfectly logical deduction. So, your argument hinges on the location of whoever stabbed the Englishwoman, does it? Well, it seems a little irrelevant now. Irrelevant? Where she was stabbed, how she was stabbed. It doesn't matter. I mean, whether she was stabbed at all makes no difference if you think about it. After all, this trial's already shown the whole thing hinges on something else. What are you talking about? Brace yourself, little man. I'm talking about the fact that everything's changed. Because of the dirt you dug up. What? Enough obscurity. Explain yourself, witness. What's to explain? I'm talking about the poison, of course. The poison? Well, let's ask the professor for a comment on the situation, shall we? I understand that a deadly poison you were developing was stolen from your laboratory, correct? And it's been shown that this poison was administered to the victim, Miss Brett. Is that right? That is correct. The unusual constriction of the victim's pupils are a sure sign that this particular poison was used. I see. So, presumably that means that the victim already had the poison in her body before she was stabbed. Given that her pupils were clearly constricted, it seems highly likely, yes. If she had been dead already, the poison could not have circulated in her blood. Ah, how refreshing to hear the argument of a metropolitan mind. Precisely. It matters not a jot who stabbed whom, and whose back, and with whose blade. Because, quite simply, the Englishwoman's life was taken not by the knife, but by the poison.
Objection!
But that can't be explained by the poison being on the blade, as I already...
Objection!
Yeah, I've forgotten already, have we, yokel? During these very proceedings, the laboratory of the professor at your side assisted in proving that the blade of the weapon used to attack the victim had no trace of poison on it whatsoever. So let me get this down. The facts, as skillfully established by the defense in this trial, turn out to be a headline-making red herring. Is that about right? Well... here we go again. Order, but where does this leave us? How, in that case, did the poison enter the victim's body? There's an undeniably obvious answer to that. The lady most likely imbibed it. You mean she drank it? Have another look at the photograph here. As you can see, a bottle of carbonated water and a glass... really? Oh, really? A bottle of carbonated water and a glass has been knocked onto the sandy floor of the beach. The poison could have been slipped into either. So somebody made Miss Brett drink it. Oh, well, what do you know? Look at those dashing eyes. This will make a great front page shot. Hey, why the bewitching stare? After all, I'm the last person you should be looking at. God damn it. It would make no sense at all that I poisoned the woman, would it? I mean, that's been established already. Established? What are you talking about? Don't tell me you've forgotten. That's a little hard to believe, given that the person who established it was you. Me? What on earth does he mean? Oh, let me capture those wide eyes. This is prime press fodder, this is. It would would seem that this trial is not destined to end yet, after all. I hereby call upon the witness to give further testimony. That's great, that is. Let me get a shot of that magnificent beard, Your Excellency. You claim it to be impossible that you were the one responsible for administering the poison to the victim. You will explain to the court in your testimony the basis upon which you make such a claim. I'm a journo and I'm a man. I've never tried to run or hide from anything in my life. And I'm not about to start now, because that's many-menmoism. For a brief moment, I thought I'd eliminated the truth, but it slipped right back into obscurity again. Just where is this trial going to take us? Oh yes, I stabbed the Englishwoman, and it's that very fact that proves I'm innocent. Because why would I have bothered to stab a woman if I'd already poisoned her? When I heard the student girl and the pompous English murderer arguing, it got my goat. If the courts weren't going to punish Brett for what she did, someone else would have to see justice done. So you admit it then, that everything happened as I described. That you are the one who stabbed Miss Brett in the back through the reed screen. You can't blame this miserable country of ours. You can blame this miserable country of ours. A country that bows to the pressure of foreign powers and lets murderers walk free. What kind of future can a country like that have? That's why I did it. I did what our pathetic leaders didn't have the guts to do. Slap bang in the middle of that charming lady's back, I plunged the blade of sweet justice right in there. This doesn't necessarily make him innocent. I mean, he may be innocent of actual murder, but he's definitely guilty of attempted murder. As someone who spends his life saying that the truth is told, I feel really, really awful about giving false information in my testimony from before, and perjury, by the way. But as it turns out, there was somebody else who had it in for the victim and got to her before me. That's right, you guessed it. That pretty little student girl. Now there's a woman after my own heart. You're implicating Ray again. She's the one who gave the poison to the Englishwoman and ended her pitiful existence. And suddenly, snap. This journo here is off the hook. I mean, no. The argument is sound, certainly. If the witness had administered the poison himself, he'd only have waited for it to take effect. Subsequently stabbing the victim in the back would have been entirely nonsensical. And therefore this reporter had nothing to do with the poisoning. Yes, it's all quite logical. That's right, it is. Logical and true. I'm glad you've all seen the light. Justice at last. This is unbelievable. And after I'd made so much progress in proving his guilt, is he going to get away with it now? I mean, he still committed a crime, so no. Think of Kazuma-sama and Naruhodo-san. He never stopped looking for a way forward until the judge's final gavel. Very well then, counsel. Proceed with what I assume to be your final cross-examination in this trial. Yes, Your Excellency.
Hold it!
So, you do admit that you had murderous intentions towards Miss Brett, then? Ha! The woman's very existence offended my sense of justice. Your sense of... he's claiming some sort of righteous indignation? She was pure evil, a cold-blooded killer who had committed murder right here on our empire's soil. But did our good-for-nothing government do anything? Not a chance, so I had to step in. Fly the flag of justice, put things right for the people. Yes, it was my civic duty. That's what drove me to do it. So, in summary, murderous intentions, then. Whatever you want to call it, the point is... that Englishwoman was a blight. So I had to do what was right for society. Yet a real wrong was done by the student girl in the dock, a crime for which she must pay. Obviously, because the poisoning was nothing to do with me at all. Because why would I have bothered to stab the woman? Blah, 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 blah. So you still maintain you didn't give the poison to the victim? Obviously, that'd be like putting a belt on your trousers when you were already wearing braces like these. The accused administered the poison, following which this witness stabbed the victim. An unforgivable act, certainly, but not one of murder, just attempted murder. That crime rests on the accused's shoulders. That is how the law works, you see, Yoko. Who knows, you may even learn something here today. Is attempted murder not a crime in this time period in Japan? 2 consecutive attempts on her life in the space of minutes? Quite a day for the victim. Not to mention, the dying part. Do something that evil and you've got it coming. That's how the law works. The law of reckoning. That's not the kind of law this court upholds. You'll reiterate why you were compelled to stab the victim then, witness? I heard the student girl and the pompous thing was murdered arguing and got my goat. What exactly were they arguing about? About what happened in that restaurant 9 months ago, that's what. The student girl was laying into the English woman for killing her beloved mentor, Dr. Wilson. Yes, John H. Wilson, a professor of medicine, invited here from England by Professor Mikoto, no less. Right, but the English woman just jeered. Her case was to be heard by the British consular court in Shanghai. However, there is little doubt that she would simply have been acquitted and sent back to her homeland a free woman. It was eating that student girl up inside. You could see it. I really felt for her. Here we go. I can't stand here and listen to this tripe. Hey, young girl, you stand accused here. You can't just blurt out whenever you feel like it. No, you can't. Sorry, but I'm in the middle of some very important testimony here. Just keep quiet and listen. But this awful man is making all of this up. Susato, please, you have to make them listen. Return to the dock at once, Membami-san. We are in the middle of a cross-examination.
Hold it!
Your Excellency, please, I implore you. That journalist is clearly not a trustworthy witness. Exactly. He's a filthy, rotten, black-hearted, bigoted, dirty, great-peeping Tom. Whoa, take it easy there. Please, I really think the court should hear what the defendant has to say. Your Excellency, I see no need whatsoever to entertain the accused's remarks. I will grant the request of the defense. But Your Excellency... This is likely to be the final cross-examination of these proceedings. As such, I believe it would be ill-advised to stifle the defendant's obvious concerns. So, whilst recognizing that this contravenes regular protocol, I hereby call upon the defendant to speak. Doesn't this put this in the realm of a mistrial if you do that? Oh, thank you so much, Your Excellency. It was nothing to do with Dr. Wilson. We were discussing the stolen poison.
Hold it!
The stolen poison that killed the victim, you mean? I suspected her of being the one to steal it. I mean, just think about how she killed Dr. Wilson. That's true. Additionally, Miss Brett certainly had knowledge of the new poison. But surely it would be no easy task to steal a highly secret toxin being developed for the government. Indeed, all visitors to the laboratory are thoroughly searched when they leave. Even if the thief managed to avoid being seen by myself or a colleague, getting the poison out would be very difficult. That's true. I pestered Professor Mikotoba until he agreed to show me the poison when I visited his laboratory. But as I left, I was searched from top to tail. Miss Brett rather bluntly revealed the existence of the toxin we'd been developing, you see. And since Soseki-san expressed such an interest in it, I was unable to refuse. Obviously, I gave nothing away other than the fact that it was an extremely potent substance. I'm very ashamed of myself. It's just that I've had a singularly terrible experience with the deadly poison. I wanted to look my old enemy in the eye. Surely you can understand that. If find out if my suspicions were true, I confronted Miss Brett about the poison. I told her that if there was to be an incident involving it somehow, it wouldn't just be the university. The military would be dragged into it. The whole government, even. It would be a complete disaster.
And how did Miss Brett respond to your concerns?
She just curled those beautiful lips of hers and said she didn't know the first thing about it. In English, actually.
Ah, yes. Minimo-san, one small question, if you don't mind.
I do mind. Can't you see I'm busy?
Clearly, you were outside the beach hut listening in whilst the defendant and Miss Brett were conversing. Presumably, then, it was you who wrote this article about what you'd heard.
What article is that? The poison article? Smallest amount entering the body via mouth or poison-laced blade. Fatal current method detected.
Exclusive. Deadly poison stolen from Yume Medical Research Laboratory. The story was published in this morning's edition of Shoyu News. The details are too accurate for it to have been written by anyone else.
Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, look at this. The entire article is almost what I said to Miss Brett, word for word. Well, Minimo-san? As a journo and as a citizen of a free country, I don't have to reveal my sources. That's a founding principle of Meniminmoism. Mother's clearly right about this. That reporter did write that article, and he based it on what he overheard from outside the hut. Details of the poison article have been updated in the court record. So that's what it was all about. You were trying to cover up the fact that you were listening in. That's why you came up with that stinking story about me arguing with her. Shut up. My stories never stink. Look, whatever you say, little girl, it doesn't alter the facts. Your Excellency, there's something I want to say, and I want it on record.
Very well, you may amend your formal testimony.
The point is, if you'd poison someone, there'd be no reason for them to go and stab a person as well.
Hold it!
Perhaps you doubted the efficacy of the poison and sought to make sure your victim would die. That's horse dog. What? That would be like pouring pepper on your Chinese ramen before you'd even tasted it. Completely reckless. Although it might surprise you to learn that I am a bit of an impetuous pepper pourer as it happens. Once the victim had taken the poison, she would have been only minutes away from death. And yet, this man then proceeded to stab her in the back as well. There has to have been a good reason for that.
If it was the reporter who gave the poison to Miss Brett, then clearly he must have done it prior to Ray entering the hut.
Yes, that's undeniable.
But between him leaving the hut and the victim being stabbed, there was one very crucial change in the situation.
Sorry? What change?
The reporter overheard the conversation between Ray and the Englishwoman.
Ah, yes, that's it. That's when Meniminmo first found out the exact nature of the poison he'd used. That could be the key here.
If the victim had unwittingly taken the poison already, the reporter would have had no reason to stab her. On the face of it, that logic sounds entirely reasonable.
There's no question that this man was responsible for Miss Brett's murder.
If we could think of a plausible explanation as to why he might have stabbed her even after the poisoning, I feel sure that everything would drop into place. That's what we should be looking for.
Yes, I agree. And in order to do that, I must try to glean more information. Okay, what does this updated thing look like now? How did this get updated? This doesn't look updated at all. Other than it just saying the reporter based it on information he gleaned by eavesdropping. The deadly poison being secretly developed by the stolen. Even a small amount in the body blood. Current methods cannot detect it. The university would have to be consulted. Once such symptoms occur in minutes, such symptoms would be suggestive of a toxin. Okay. Both 2 and 5 basically say the same thing. So, because it's traceable?
Objection!
Well, I can think of one reason. What? But before I explain, I'd like you to confirm something for the court. Did you glean all the information for this newspaper article from what you overheard outside the hut? Of course he did. There can be no question of that. After all, when we were all in the laboratory together, all we were told is that it was a terrible toxin. And there is one important fact to consider. According to the witness, Menbami-san's verbal attack against the victim began as soon as she entered the hut. In other words, it would have been impossible for her to have slipped the poison into Miss Brett's drink.
Objection!
Where are you going with this, counsel? Menimenmo-san has made it quite clear that he observed every single thing that happened in the beach hut. If the defendant had somehow found an opportunity, this man would have seen it. Which means that Miss Brett couldn't have imbibed the poison whilst the defendant was present. In fact, it must have been administered to her before Menbami-san entered the hut. Yes, very articulate. The irony. Articulately put. When I walked into the hut, I immediately started to press Miss Brett about the poison. At which point, Menimenmo-san overheard some worrying information. Worrying information? What worrying information? The information which he subsequently included in his newspaper article, namely, that the poison was being developed in strict secrecy and that it couldn't be really readily obtained. Absolutely. In fact, that's quite an understatement. The only possible place it could come from is my lab. And furthermore, anyone afflicted by the poison would exhibit telltale signs in death. The extreme constriction of the pupils. Yes, it's quite stark when you see it. There are other poisons that show similar symptoms, but not among new substances that are undetectable. In other words, it would be clear that the victim's life had been ended by the use of this particular poison, which would reduce the number of suspects to only a handful of people. Everyone in my laboratory is aware of the unique properties of the toxin we've been developing. None of them would be foolish enough to attempt to use it for some nefarious deed. Menbami-san being no exception. Therefore, we can conclude that whoever administered this unique poison to the victim was a layperson unaware of its telltale properties. What noise is that? In other words, someone like you, Daiten Menimenmo. It was you who stole the poison from the laboratory that day, and it was you who administered it to the unwitting victim, but you quickly realized that was a terrible mistake, because the poison caused such unusual symptoms and was so traceable. As you listened as you listened in from the far side of the beach hut's thin walls, you learnt of these facts, and you'd already given the victim the poison at that point. It was too late. So you hatched a plan to disguise your mistake. A plan that involved stabbing the victim in the back through the reed screen.
Objection!
Yeah, but what good could that possibly do? Isn't it obvious, counsel? The plan was to kill Miss Brett before the poison could take effect. Once in the blood, the poison causes the onset of pupil constriction. But he had hoped to precipitate the victim's death before that happened, hadn't he? Exactly. Because without any revealing signs of the new secret poison's use, no one would have ever suspected.
This is extraordinary.
Yes, the effect of the poison meant it would be too easily identified, so the killer had to mask its use, which he attempted to do by plunging a knife into the middle of the victim's back.
Order. Order. The argument presented is sound. The court is satisfied that it warrants consideration. Does the prosecution have a counter-argument it wishes to put forward?
There are a number of... yes, I counter completely.
Objection!
The prosecution's evasive response clearly shows that in much the same way as he nurtures the remnants of his topknot, he is clinging to lost hope. But lost hope?
Oh, Jesus Christ, now what?
You pathetic, useless fallen samurai. Fallen? Who are you calling fallen? My burgeoning growth... I don't need a counter-argument. What are you talking about? It should be blatantly obvious. I stole the poison, you say. Gave it to the victim, you say. Stabbed her, you say. Lots of fine theories. But I don't need a counter-argument because you don't have an argument yourself. Where's your evidence? Yes, you make it all sound so plausible, don't you? But without evidence, it means nothing. Whereas I base my news on facts.
Facts? What do you mean? Explain yourself.
I mean what the professor said earlier in his trial. It's all here, in my many memos. Every word, every slip of the tongue, all noted. That's what the Show You News is famous for. It's the power of the printed word.
Surely it would be no easy task to steal a highly secret toxin from the developer government.
Yes, all visitors to the lab are thoroughly searched when they leave. If the thief managed to avoid being seen by myself or a colleague, and poison would be very difficult. How's that, then? Blown the story wide open? See? I, write in many memo. A mere reporter from the Show You News. Couldn't possibly have stolen that poison. From the professor's laboratory. But there can't be any question of it. He must have stolen the poison that day. He stole it and used it to kill. And if that's the case... As you've identified, the poison itself is the definitive evidence we need. Because whoever stole it from the laboratory that day is the true culprit here. What's your point, you annoyingly handsome young country bumpkin? My point is this. There is one way that you, Miniminmo-san, could have stolen the poison that day.
I've heard enough verbal conjecture now, thank you. What the court must show is evidence.
What proof do you have that this witness stole the poison on the day in question? I mean, this is the only other thing from the scene of the crime.
Take that!
Well, I think you'll agree that it's clearly demonstrated by this piece of evidence here. Yeah, I guess not, huh?
By that you intend to prove that the witness stole the poison. How exactly, counsel?
You couldn't know that until you'd attempted it yourself, you excellency. Fuck.
The file in which the poison is kept is still in the laboratory, which means that the thief must have transferred a quantity of it to another container.
Don't give it all away, Father. Okay, Jesus. So what you're saying is I should be looking for a piece of evidence that could be used as some kind of vessel.
Well, yes, that is more or less what I said, indeed.
Let's have another good look through the court record before Father solves this whole thing for me. So, I mean, again, this is the... because that's the reagent. So what, we gotta look a little closer at the pen? Yeah. We take out the pen's lid. Now let's unscrew the barrel, shall we? How many fucking times do I have to point into this? Just do it. This must be the little reservoir that holds the ink.
Yes, you fill it by drawing ink from a bottle up through the nib.
Is something wrong, Father?
Just that there doesn't actually appear to be any ink in there, that's all.
Oh, yes, you're right. It's pretty much empty. Well, it could be on the verge of running out, I suppose. Details of the fountain pen have been updated in the court record. Okay. Now we'll present it.
Take that!
The proof is this fountain pen. A fountain pen? How can that possibly be relevant? These magical pens somehow seem to have enough ink to write many thousands of kanji characters. I believe they arrived in our country for the first time some 15 years ago now. Ha, I swear by a weasel hair calligraphy brush and nothing else. These newfangled pens are merely a fad. Well, as a forward-thinking man of words, obviously I love my fountain pen. Such a souchon of sumptuous ink, and one's work is awash with words in the blink of an eye. That's right. Fountain pens have a small reservoir in the barrel, into which ink is sucked up through the nib of the pen in order to write with later. What does all this talking of sucking up ink have? And just as it's possible to suck ink up into the reservoir, it's also possible to eject it through the nib again, of course. My word. Can this really be? Have you never seen a pen before? Well, Minimosan, when you saw the deadly poison before your eyes in the laboratory that day, you used your fountain pen, your very lifeblood, to steal some of it, didn't you? By siphoning the poison up through the nib and into the pen's reservoir.
Objection!
More absurdity. That never happened. True, we've heard that there were procedures in place to prevent thefts like this from the laboratory. But would anyone have thought to look inside a fountain pen of all places?
No, I'm a little ashamed to say that for fear of offending our guests, such a detailed search would not have been conducted.
Well, this is quite startling, I must say. I remind the court that this pen was found in the clutches of the victim when she died. In other words, it was dropped at the scene by Minimosan. So the crucial question is, when exactly was the pen dropped?
Are you suggesting?
The natural conclusion is that in your haste to act while the victim was distracted for a moment, you dropped the pen after you emptied the poison from it into her glass.
Objection!
Now, there could be any number of alternative explanations. For example, the witness could have been using his pen to write down details of his conversation with the victim. And when shocked by one of her outrageous answers, the pen fell from his quivering hand. No, that can't be. If it was, how do you explain why the pen was devoid of ink? What? As you can see for yourself, and if you examine the evidence, there would appear to be no ink present in the reservoir. What newspaper reporter goes to interview someone with nothing in his pen? No, the pen was dropped after the poison that filled its reservoir had been emptied into the victim's glass.
Witness, what do you have to say in your defense?
So this is how our modern justice system works, is it? So what if the ink in my pen runs dry? So what if my pencil snaps? I can always claw my way back into the game. I have plenty in reserve. You claim I sucked the poison up into my pen? That's wild speculation, nothing more. If you thought you could bring down a fine upstanding citizen with a trick like that, think again. A fine upstanding citizen who attempted murder, sure.
It looks as though it's going to take one final decisive blow to finish this matter.
As I see it, the situation is now very simple. It rests upon whether or not this witness did indeed steal the poison on the day in question, and therefore, it all depends upon whether or not the defense can prove that he did with evidence. Ah, no such evidence could possibly exist. Minimin-san, this is how our modern justice system works. What? In the courtroom, evidence is everything. Something you would do well to remember. Because we are well past the point of speculation at this stage, I assure you.
Very well, then. I call upon the defense to present the aforementioned evidence.
This is it, then. This will be the final piece in the puzzle. The defense can prove by means of this item that it was the witness's pen that was used to steal the poison. I guess this thing.
Take that!
Counsel, what is this bottle?
This bottle contains the unique chemical reagent that can identify the poison in question.
Yes, this poison is an entirely new synthesis of alkaloids developed by my colleagues and I. It would be impossible to detect traces of it by any other method.
Or, from another perspective, simply with this chemical reagent, anybody at all could check for traces of the poison. A reagent? What? One drop of the contents of this bottle on the tip of your fountain pen, Minimin-san, is all it will take to solve this case beyond all reasonable doubt. No, you can't. I won't. Your crimes are bad enough, but at least know when to admit defeat. Your Excellency, the defense requests permission to carry out the test on the fountain pen at once. This isn't my fault. The Empire drove me to this. Try to hold its head high as a civilized nation, bowing down. Okay, whatever. Susato, with me! Did I do it right? That was a Susato takedown, wasn't it? Not quite. That was a Ryotaro takedown. The instant the first drop of the reagent touched the nib of the fountain pen, it was clear to everyone present. When I saw it there in the lab, the poison, the devil got hold of me, and I decided to do it on a whim. I excused myself and emptied all the ink down the sink in the bathroom, washing the reservoir out carefully. And then you waited for an opportunity to suck up some of the poison, didn't you? Didn't you? Into the fountain pen. Yes, that's right.
Answer me one thing, Minimin-san. Why did you steal it? For what purpose?
Obvious purpose. Isn't it obvious? To find out what it was made of and expose it in an article. I mean, it was a secret project after all, too juicy for a journal like me to pass up. Then why did the Englishwoman end up dead? I went into that hut intending to quiz her on her situation, that's all, as a reporter. A known killer enjoying full freedom, evading justice by leaving the country. I told her what I thought about it. And she just laughed in my face. Oh, what's this? A Far Eastern caveman purporting to practice journalism? Really, you must learn the difference between reporting and listening at doorways, you ignorant plebeian. What did you call me? This country, with its pretensions of a justice system, to a free press, it's really very depressing. You see our superior ways in the West, yet you lack the mental capacity to emulate them. Get out of here, you oaf. Get out and crawl back into the cave you came from. Wait a minute, what the fuck is she drinking? Why are there two glasses? That's when I remembered about the deadly poison I happened to have in my pen at the time.
a terrible tale.
In my head, I knew I should just get out of there as quickly as possible, but I couldn't. I couldn't let her get away with what she'd done, when she clearly had no remorse at all. I suppose it was my journo spirit getting all fired up. I'd like to ask you something.
Yes?
You often talk about justice. Surely, as a journalist, you could have used other means to deliver the justice you sought. There's no justice in the press. Sorry. After that trial 9 months ago, I kept digging and digging to find out what had happened in that courtroom. And finally, I discovered the truth. It was a cover-up, that's what it was.
A cover-up? What do you mean? I would remind you of your position, witness. Be careful of what you say.
Oh, come on. Doesn't it strike you as strange? We're suddenly not allowed to convict a foreign national? Consular jurisdiction should never have come into it. And yet that puffed-up Englishwoman is going to sail away into the sunset a free woman. The only possible explanation is that, behind the scenes, some deal had gone down between Britain and Japan. What sort of deal? I'd done my research, dug up all the dirt. It was all ready to be published. But you know what happened? The editor just tore the article up.
He came under pressure from the government, you mean?
If our government is going to let criminals walk free, if they're going to crush the free press, then what choice do I have but to see the justice is done myself? Let's not forget, Minimenmo-san. You committed murder yourself, and you tried to lay the blame at the defendant's door. I'm sorry, but you're no better than Giselle Brett. What? The truth is, you have no right to talk about justice at all. I suppose.
It would appear that we have reached a conclusion in this trial at last. Counsel for the defense, Ryunosuke Naruhodo.
Yes. Sorry, Your Excellency. You just musing in a manly way here.
It's almost unbelievable that this is your first experience of the Supreme Court.
It was an excellent performance. In truth, it very much reminded me of your cousin's exploits. Naruhodo's, Ryunosuke, you mean?
The way he handled the trial 9 months ago and the way you handled this one gives me hope that we are genuinely entering a new era of justice in this land.
That's very flattering, Your Excellency. Hearing the defense you put forward today made me feel most keenly that the future of our justice system will be forged by you and your contemporaries. Thank you.
So, Prosecutor Aochi, do you have any final thoughts?
Seppuku. Prosecutor Aochi. I, Takatsuchi of the Ochi clan, have been bested by a callow youth not once now, but twice. If there was any shred of my former self left, it has withered and died here today. Gosh, your journey to cultural enlightenment sure took a while, didn't it? Silence! Rather than living on in shame, I will end it all now with his blade. For that is the true path of Ochiism. Ochiism?
One hopes that's the only way in which he'll be modeling himself after the witness.
I like how absolutely no one is concerned that he's about to do this. Sprig of my topknot, the time is right for farewell. Hope is lost forever. Takatsuchi.
Now, in regard to the defendant, Rei Memami-san,
Yes, Your Excellency?
I have reached my final verdict. I hereby find you not guilty. About goddamn time. 3 hours into the tutorial. Court is adjourned.
It's over. My heart is still pounding in my chest, though. It's all I can do just to stay standing. Lawyers have such great responsibility, such a great burden to bear. Don't they, Naruhodo-san? Susato! Thank you so much. You were so dashing in there. Rei, and Father. Honestly, I'm so touched by everything you've... Oh no, I think I'm going to cry. It wasn't easy, but together we made it. I was on the verge of tears at the end, too. The only reason I'm still here is because of you. Oh no, I can't take all the credit. It took courage to tell the truth in there. You did wonderfully, Rei. So I would have to say that the congratulations belong to you. Susato, don't be so standoffish. Sorry? We're friends, equals, and the trial's over. So no more of this formal super humility nonsense. It's time to celebrate with swagger. Throw caution to the wind. Caution to the... what? I'm the great defense lawyer, Ryutaro Naruhodo, and I'm taking you out to a milk bar tomorrow. Or something. Right, I see. I'll, think about it, Rei. At any rate, we really knocked the wind out of that horrid man, and it felt so good. Yes, it was satisfying. It really was. Isn't there anybody else we could throw up together?
I hope you're not looking at me, Rei.
No, my goodness, no, of course not. Of course not. There it is at last. Rei's lovely smile.
You fought for your friend to the very last. As your father, I'm extremely proud of you, defense attorney Ryutaro Naruhodo.
Thank you, but I couldn't have done it without your help. Anyway, it's time to bid farewell to Ryutaro, I think. I shall miss him in a way, but it's back to Susato Mikotoba now. So I'll never see him again, then? What a terrible shame. What is happening? Saseki-san and Inspector Hosonaga. I do hope you've been keeping well. Is that really you? Yes, I had to change my appearance for, well, obvious reasons, I hope, but it's me, Susato Mikotoba. Don't... So dashing, so divine. No. Doubly dashing, yes, and devilishly divine. Just look at you. I had no idea, Miss Susato-san Esquires, that you were locum student Naruhodo-san's Esquire's cousin. Astonishingly astounding ace attorney. Poor Saseki-san, so confused. I still remember the first time I ever met him. He was in a prison cell in London. Yes, we all remember this, please. An extraordinary conundrum it was that the unwitting student from Japan found himself embroiled in. But after Naruhodo-san's skillful defense of the Old Bailey, at the Old Bailey, I cannot read anymore, let's end this. Saseki-san was free to return to Japan. And now he seems to have earned himself a great fame as an author. I'm stunned. That's a truly impressive disguise. Even I had no idea, and I'm the chief inspector at the police bureau. Who came up with Mr. Turtle, no less? You really ought to get that looked at.
I'm not sure you should be admitting to that, Inspector.
Amazing. You are a woman of many faces, I see. Just two, really, and this was a once-in-a-lifetime event, I hope. Oh, I'm not a patch on you, though, Inspector. You who clearly missed the crime scene and all the other hits. Well, I am a professional, of course. I do worry about Inspector Hosonaga sometimes, I really do. And the blood trickling out of his mouth is enough to worry about. 9 months ago, when he appeared here at the Supreme Court to testify, he was undercover, disguised as the head waiter of a restaurant. And then on the steamship to Great Britain, of course, disguised as a sailor to keep us safe on the journey. Though that didn't help you, did it, Kazuma-sama? From my perspective, I have to admit that I have mixed feelings about all this. I mean, now that the truth has been lost forever. What do you mean? I'm talking about the murder that the English woman committed at the end of last year. Ah, yes, it was an English doctor she killed, as I understand it.
Dr. John H. Wilson, yes. The man I invited to Japan personally.
Mystery is, why did she kill him? And now that the culprit herself is dead, we'll probably never know the answer. On the voyage to Great Britain, we had a most unexpected encounter with Mr. Herlock Sholmes, the great detective. Yes, I remember Mr. Sholmes well, of course. Ah, my arch-nemesis. How lightly you utter his name. Well, according to the stories published about him in The Adventures of Herlock Sholmes, the detective once had a partner who helped him solve crimes, a best friend. And that man was an exceptional doctor of medicine by the name of John H. Wilson. What? Dr. Wilson? I just can't believe that it's a coincidence. I think the English doctor of medicine killed here in Japan 9 months ago must have been the friend and partner of Mr. Sholmes. And if that's really true, then the poor girl won't ever see her beloved father again.
As you know, I traveled to Great Britain once myself to study. It was around the time you were born.
Yes, grandmother told me about it.
On returning to Japan, I took up professorship at the Imperial Yumei University, but I also serve another role as an advisor to the government on diplomatic affairs.
Yes, I was aware of that as well.
In that case, I'm sure you understand that there are some confidential matters I cannot divulge to you.
Could you just tell me one thing? Why did you summon me back to Japan? It's been 2 months now since I returned. When I left England, it was because an urgent telegram had arrived from Japan. It said you'd collapsed with a high fever and you were growing weaker by the day. What? Where did that news come from? That's what I'd like to know, because after that long sea voyage, I found you in fine health, Father. Was there something in Great Britain that you perceived might inconvenience me in some way, or harm me? That's really the only explanation I can think of.
Dear me, do you reserve your most cutting glares for your father, Susato? I'm sorry, my dear, I simply can't... Jesus Christ, now what?
Minimosan. So, one throw wasn't enough for you. I've got one last thing to say before they take me away, Professor.
Me?
I know the truth. I know you had a hand in what went on, in that visiting student's fate. Visiting student? Giselle Brett, you mean? No, not her, the student of law who left for Great Britain 8 months ago. What, a student of law? He must mean... Kazuma-sama. What are you talking about? What does any of this have to do with Kazuma-sama? Nobody here in Japan knows anything about it. They don't know that the guy never made it to England, that he died on the steamship, and that he'll never...
Well, I didn't expect to find him in here. What were you officers playing at?
Terribly sorry, Your Excellency.
I was coming to tell you that the rickshaw has arrived, Eugene, and it's a good job I came by. Yes, thank you for dealing with him, and I'll be there shortly.
Oh, Your Excellency.
The trial's over. I'm not Your Excellency anymore, merely your father's friend. Seishiro Jigoku. Jigoku. Jigoku meaning hell. And may I say that since I saw you last, you seem to have taken on a more dashing appearance. Susato. Yeah. Did you know all along from the start of the trial? A judge sees everything, Susato. I couldn't let you take the risk. If Seishiro had... Seishiro... How do you pronounce that name? Seishiro? Seishiro? If Seishiro here hadn't known, and that he'd recognized you... So I had a word in his ear beforehand, as an old friend. So, Seishiro, shall we? Yes, having ruled on that case, we now have various diplomatic issues to address. Before you go, Father... Sorry, my dear. We shall have to return to our earlier conversation at a later date. But well done again, both of you. You did admirably. Oh, thank you very much. What did you think of my Seishiro sling, eh? It's been a while since I sent a man flying like that. Whatever could Father be hiding from me? About Giselle Brett, about Dr. Wilson, and now, it seems, according to the reporter, about Kazuma-sama. I'm going to have to bring this up with Father sometime, when nobody else is around. Judicial Assistant Mikotoba-san Esquires, could I have a word? Oh, yes, of course, Saseki-san. What is it? I think perhaps it could be fate that we're meeting again like this now. You see, there's something I need to tell you. Oh? I believe that it may be related to the reason why your father summoned you back from England. This I have to hear. Please, Saseki-san, tell me at once. I will. As you know, my time in England was terrible. Cursed, I have no doubt. Such awful things I was embroiled in. Thank goodness locum student Naruhodo-san Esquire stepped in. And after he secured my freedom, I couldn't wait to get on a ship back here to my homeland. Having arrived in Japan, I submitted a report about my experiences to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The next thing I knew, I had a visitor. It was your father, Professor Mikotoba. He wanted to ask me all sorts of things about my report. My father? He seemed to be especially taken with a particular part of the report. Anyway, he left eventually, having thoroughly quizzed me. But it was the very next day that he sent the telegram to you asking you to return to Japan. What was it then, the particular part my father was interested in? I don't really know exactly. But do you remember them? Oh, but do you remember them? Those two terrible cases I was caught up in? Of course, I could never forget. Your father seemed to concern himself mainly with this second case. The second one? You mean the one Mr. Sholmes forbade any of us to talk about in public? The one that I, the player who played through them, can't remember? Which is why the only case involving you that any member of the public is aware of is the first. Well, I don't care. I don't have to listen to what that dastardly detective says. Anyway, the point is, it seems that case somehow holds the key to all these curious unanswered questions. That horrific, hideous, heinous case. The case of the haunted lodgings. That case somehow caused my father to summon me urgently back to Japan. That whole business was over. But it seems I was wrong. Perhaps that was only the start. Perhaps the story is not yet told. Oh my God, are we done yet?
The mystery of that English woman's death is solved, thank goodness. And having stood in the Supreme Court now, I think I can comprehend a little better. How you must be feeling as you fight for people's freedom in a foreign land, Naruhodo-san. But actually, I'm writing to you today because of another matter. I met Soseki-san and we talked about that second case he was involved in. Father has said nothing to me, but I feel certain of it. That case holds the key to some great unsolved mystery. My notes on the case should still be in the office, tucked away at the back of the shelves on the left. Perhaps you might like to look over them again. Today, for the first time this year, it feels as though summer has arrived. The sky is a brilliant blue. It makes me long to see you again. Yours, Susato.
Had I known how much longer there was after the damned case, I would have cut this into 2 parts. Alright, episode 2. Finally. So what, there's 5 like last time? Yeah. Okay. See you next time.